What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Studio Hunt Show. The NFL Draft is officially less than 1 month away. It's absolutely crazy that we are this close to the draft. There's been lots of mock drafts with the Bengals. Maybe it's 3 hour mock drafts, 7 hour mock drafts, and there's so many different choices that the Bengals could get at pick 28. Literally, it seems like every single day there's somebody else, mentioned and talks about the Bengals could be selecting with pick 28, the Bengals' first round pick in next month's draft. But doing a Bengals 7 round mock draft here with trades. Normally, when I do mock draft videos, I always do them from PFF. But PFF now, you actually have to pay to do a 7 round mock draft. So instead, I'm doing it from Pro Football Network. And something I feel like has not been talked about enough for Cincinnati throughout this really whole draft process for the Bengals. Everybody's talking about who the Bengals are going to draft at 28, but realistically, I would not be surprised at all if the Bengals don't even select and pick with the 28th pick overall. History has shown that the Bengals, when there are players on the board that they like, they are more than willing to trade back. And I feel like the Bengals trading back in next month's draft is a real possibility depending on who is available because there's several mock drafts. You might have a guy like Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Jamar Gibbs, several other players be available with pick 28. And if you're Cincinnati, I feel like it's possible they might trade back. In 2017, 2017, 18, 19, and 2021, the Bengals have all traded back in the second round. With their second round picks, they've traded back later into the second round. The Bengals picking 28. This is basically kind of like a second round pick because you're kind of getting towards the end of the first round here. And I feel like it's very possible the Bengals could end up trading the 28th pick and going back into maybe the first round or maybe back into the second round and starting this mock draft here from Pro Football Network, a 7 round mock draft with trades. That's what I have the Bengals doing here. Starting off the mock draft, I have the Bengals trading back to pick 30 with the Philadelphia Eagles. And to me, when you were looking at this, situation here, there were just too many players on the board to me to pick at 28. There's lots of players, some of the best players available. I feel like it would not be a bad idea to maybe trade back 4 or 5 spots back. And that's what I have the Bengals doing here. And, so we trade with Philadelphia. We trade the number 28th pick, our first round pick, to Philadelphia for their first round pick, the 30th pick. So we swap first round picks, and Philadelphia gives us their 94th pick overall, which is the Eagles' third round pick. So, there's been lots of talks the past couple of weeks, what the Bengals are going to do with Joe Mixon. And to me, it is so crazy. Heading into the offseason, I don't feel like that was something that, was really possible that the Bengals could maybe let go of Joe Mixon. But, it came out today, the audio version of Katie Blackburn talking about Mixon, and you could just tell, like, with her tone and everything, I feel like the odds of Mixon being on this roster to start the 2023 regular season are getting slimmer and slimmer each day. And with this pick here, the Bengals trading back with Philadelphia, I have the Bengals taking Jamar Gibbs, the running back from Alabama, in the first round. I love this pickup here so much because in any other year, Gibbs is going to be without question, the best running back in the draft class. But with Robinson from Texas, many think he's by far the best running back. Many people think he's a generational type of running back talent here in the draft. You're getting, most years, without question, the best running back in the draft class with the 30th pick overall, a position that, you could use some help in, with you losing P. Ryan. And Mixon only has 1 year left on his deal. If you draft Gibbs, if you cut Mixon post June 1st, you would save $8 million. It makes sense. I'm kind of surprised this is not being talked about more, although I do understand people talking about maybe a guy like McBride from UAB, Spears from Tulane, maybe in the third or fourth round. If you don't want to waste a first-round pick on a running back, I get it. But to me, this was a situation where Gibbs is just a too talented of a player to pass up here with the 30th pick. I mean, he is absolutely phenomenal. He had over 1,000 yards this past year, 10 touchdowns. He had over 40 receptions this past year for Alabama. And when you look at the Bengals in Mixon this past year, he's really got more involved in the pass catching game. And I feel like Gibbs could basically replace him and just have as good as production or maybe even better in the pass catching game if he would be on the Bengals this season to replace Joe Mixon. But the Bengals draft the running back of the future here, Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back from Alabama with the 30th pick. here in the first round, trading back with the Philadelphia Eagles. Round 2, this is where it gets absolutely crazy. I did this mock draft before Irv Smith Jr. was signed with Cincinnati. I did this mock draft probably about 4 or 5 days ago, and I was trying to find just a different mock draft, just aside from this one. But this is, to me, by far the best mock draft I've ever done. It's probably the best mock draft I've seen. So the Bengals get Gibbs in round 1. Round 2 is where it gets crazy. I don't know how this guy was available, but it goes to best player available. You always take best player available. This is the steal of the draft right here. The Bengals somehow get Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame, here in the second round with the 60th pick overall from Pro Football Network's mock draft simulator. The odds of Michael Mayer being here at 60 are extremely, extremely slim. I would say it's less than a 1% chance, but when you look at players, it does seem like there's at least one player every single year who's pretty much a lock to be a first-round pick, and then he might slip to the middle of the second or maybe even the third. We've seen pretty much one player at least every single year for the most part. Is the odds of it being Michael Mayer are not likely at all, but I mean, if you have an opportunity to get Michael Mayer here in the second round with the 60th pick overall, that's the steal of the draft. That's the best draft choice in the entire draft. I mean, you could pretty much go ahead and say it. If the Bengals select him here with the 60th pick, he would be a great pickup for Cincinnati. He's arguably the best tight end in the draft. He might not even be available with the Bengals' 28th pick, and they get him with a 60th pick. That's absolutely tremendous value. He's a big Bengals fan. He's a big Burrow fan. He's from Ohio. He's from Cincinnati. It makes tons of sense. Michael Mayer to Cincinnati with a 60th pick would be a great selection by the Bengals. And when you look at it, even if the Bengals don't trade back, or maybe they do trade back, maybe they trade back and get Michael Mayer. Maybe they take him at 28. To me, I don't feel like that would be a bad idea, depending on who's available. But to me, part of the reason why I traded back was because there was just so many talented players left at 28. And the fact that you get two players who arguably should not even be there at 28, and you trade back and you get one at 30 and one at 60 is tremendous draft selections here for the Bengals. So round 3, the Bengals have 2 third-round picks with their trade back with the Philadelphia Eagles. With their first third-round pick, to take TCU corner Trevius Hodges-Tomlinson. He's the best corner here, I would say, by a decent margin. He's going to be one of the best players available here. And when you look at trading here in the third and fourth rounds, I feel like it's kind of too complicated, and it's not really worth it. If anything, normally teams would trade up into the third round rather than trading back into the third round. And I did one kind of crazy trade. I'm not going to do another one in this simulator here. But Hodges-Tomlinson was one of the best corners this season. He was absolutely phenomenal at TCU. A big reason, for TCU's success on defense when it comes to, pass defense and stuff like that. But this is a great selection because when you look at the Bengals, they recently signed, Sidney Jones. When you look at Eli Apple, it's crazy. He's probably not going to end up re-signing with Cincinnati. Chidobe Awuzie is by far our best corner. He's coming off a season-ending injury. You don't know how he's going to perform, and he only has 1 year left on his deal. I feel like that's something the Bengals really should consider in the first couple rounds. Take a corner as long as it's not a reach, and he's one of the best players available. And you look at Mike Hilton, he's going to be, he's getting up there in age. He's by far our oldest corner. I think he's around 30 or so. And when you look at Jones, like I said, he's only on a 1 year deal. Getting more corner help was not a bad idea at all. In the third round here, getting TCU corner Trevius Hodges-Tomlinson. Like I said, the Bengals have 2 second-round picks. And with their second-round pick, they take Michigan defense tackle Mazi Smith. This is the guy I've seen some mock drafts have him be a late first-round pick or maybe even a second-round pick. They get him with the 94th selection here. I don't know what it is about mock draft simulators this year. It just seems like they are absolutely all over the place. I mean, I've seen him be, drafted in the first round. I've seen him be drafted in the third round. It just really depends on what maybe mock draft simulator you use, whether it's PFF or Pro Football Network. But this is by far the best player available on the board here. And when you look at defense tackle, they could use a little bit more help at defense tackle. I love this draft choice here by Cincinnati. 30, 60, 92, and 94. All 4 of those draft picks so far for Cincinnati have been great selections, A-plus picks, in my opinion, and they've all been pretty much the best player available here. Continuing this mock draft here, heading into the 4th round, I have the Bengals taking Tulane linebacker Dorian Williams was amazing last year. He had over 130 tackles, over 8 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks last year for Tulane. Jermaine Price surprised everybody by re-signing with Cincinnati, but the Bengals could still maybe use a little bit more linebacker help because Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson are both free agents next offseason. And I feel like the Bengals are going to be prioritizing maybe a T. Higgins extension and some other things before maybe they're looking at a Logan Wilson extension. It is possible they may extend Logan Wilson, but if we lose Davis-Gaither, I don't feel like it'll be bad to get a linebacker here in the mid-rounds. And Dorian Williams is by far the best linebacker available. I also like Ivan Pace Jr. a lot from Cincinnati. I was wanting to take him here with the 131st pick, but he was already taken. So those are 2 linebackers I really like in the middle rounds if the Bengals go linebacker. Dorian Williams and Ivan Pace Jr. From Cincinnati. But this is a great draft choice here. It's not really a top team need, but it's best player available. When you're looking at day 3 picks, do not even draft team needs. You're drafting best player available no matter what. For instance, when you look at Cincinnati, if there's a guy in the, let's say, 4th, 5th, or 6th round who's a wide receiver and you just can't pass up, wide receiver is arguably our biggest strength on our whole roster. But if he's best player available, you take him because you're always taking the best guy and he can help your team. Maybe not necessarily right now, but definitely in the future. But the Bengals take Dorian Williams, the linebacker from Tulane here in the 4th round. Continuing this mock draft here, another player who's best player available, Bowling Green edge rusher Carl Brooks, a 5th round pick, 163rd pick overall, A+ pick. I love this pickup. Brooks is a very, very underrated edge rusher. To me, I feel like if he played at Ohio State or Alabama, he'd be pretty much a lot to be a 1st round pick. And the fact that he's, getting talks of being a early 2nd round pick, mid 2nd round pick by playing at a small school at Bowling Green, just kind of shows how good he is. And despite playing at a small school, he's still getting tons of recognition. He has over 25 sacks in his career. He has over 45 tackles for loss in his career. This is a tremendous value pick, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but when you look at Cincinnati, every single one of these draft choices are the best player available, and they're great picks. And if the Bengals get half of these guys, like this is just a tremendous draft that could happen for Cincinnati next month. But the Bengals are continuing to go best player available here in this draft. I know some people might not like it at this point, me not drafting an offensive lineman, but I'll kind of talk about that once this mock draft is over here. But the Bengals take Carl Brooks in the 5th round here. The Bengals actually take another edge rusher here in the 6th round. Byron Young, the edge rusher from Tennessee. I know we just took edge, but he's the best player available. Go back and look at the 2020 draft when the Bengals drafted Logan Wilson in the 3rd round from Wyoming. Lots of people were not expecting the Bengals to take another linebacker early. I really, really liked Akeem Davis-Gaither coming into the draft. Obviously, aside from Burrow, he was my favorite player coming out of the 2020 draft. I was kind of upset that the Bengals took Wilson because, that meant the odds of them getting Davis-Gaither weren't that high, but they still took Davis-Gaither in the 4th round. They doubled back on the same position because he was the best player available. If the Bengals are able to do that in the 3rd and 4th round, I feel like it's definitely possible. We can maybe see a scenario where the Bengals do that in the 5th and 6th round by taking Carl Brooks and Byron Young, the edge rusher from Tennessee. I love this draft choice here by Cincinnati. And the Bengals have one final pick here, and I have them taking Florida linebacker Ventrell Miller. Once again, the Bengals take 2 linebackers in this draft, but Miller is a guy who you might as well go ahead and take him. He's a great player. He shouldn't be here with a 246 pick. And to me, if you're a team drafting in the 7th round, go ahead and get your guy who you think is maybe one of the better players available, or a guy you really like, because you can go ahead and draft him. If he's not drafted, he can kind of like pick and choose who he wants to sign with as an undrafted free agent. If Ventrell Miller is here, I would love it if the Bengals pick him up. He was a guy who, the past year or two did not have as high production as he did in the past with Florida. But during the 2021 season with Florida, 2020 season with Florida, he was absolutely a monster for their defense. But Ventrell Miller is a great pickup here for Cincinnati. Every single draft choice for the Bengals in this mock draft was best player available. If they can get half these guys, I will be so freaking excited. Michael Mayer, to me, getting with a 60th pick, That's by far the most unrealistic, I would say, but that'd be the biggest steal without question in this mock draft. It would be the biggest steal in next month's draft by far. But, I guarantee you there's going to be some people not liking me, not taking an offensive lineman in this draft. The reason I don't have the Bengals taking an offensive lineman, one, to me, pretty much, unless there's a guy who absolutely should not be available, a guy who should not be there at 28, who he is, a guy like Peter Skorinski or something like that, I'm not taking an offensive lineman in round one. When you look at the Bengals, they have a horrible, horrible, horrible track record of developing offensive linemen. They cannot develop an offensive lineman to save their life. Every single time they draft an offensive lineman, he's pretty much terrible. Jake Fisher, Cedric Obrehey, I know that was years ago. Look at Jonah Williams, Jackson Carman. The Bengals traded back and still got Jackson Carman, even though there was better offensive linemen on the board. Cardo Volson was okay last year, but to me, he wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. He was about average. The Bengals have not drafted an offensive lineman and developed him a guy better than average in over 10 years. I mean, you're going to have to look at like Kevin Zeitler, Clint Bowling, something like that. Like, it truly is ridiculous for Cincinnati, the fact that they have not developed the offensive lineman properly in over a decade. And I feel like that's something else with the Orlando Brown signing. I don't feel like people really talking about enough. That takes away the Bengals' chances of developing a left tackle, which is great because they can't develop an offensive lineman. Like I said, I don't want the Bengals drafting offensive lineman in round one unless he is without a doubt, without question, the best player available with the 28th pick. A guy like, Paris Johnson Jr., Peter Skorinski, somebody like that. But I just don't like the idea because they cannot develop him to save their life at all. And by the time the Bengals drafted with the 60th pick, Michael Mayer, I'm taking him no matter what. Like, that's an obvious question. You're crazy if you do not take Michael Mayer with the 60th pick if he's still available. So that rules out about taking an offensive line. By the time the 92nd pick happens, I mean, Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson and Mozzie Smith, two guys who are the best player available, you get both of them. I mean, by that point, I don't feel like it's necessary for the Bengals to take an offensive line because if they cannot develop a first-round talent or they cannot develop a second-round talent, a guy like Jonah Williams or a guy like Jackson Carman, if you cannot develop guys like that who have tons of potential, who are some of the best players at their position in the draft, if you can't develop them, how are you going to develop a guy drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, something like that? So at this point, I'm not drafting an offensive lineman because there's much better players on the board. It's not necessary to draft an offensive lineman. You never should fixate on a position. Go look back at when the Bengals drafted Billy Price. And the Bengals could have traded back to get Billy. The Bengals could have traded back about 10 spots or so, maybe got an extra 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick, and still got Billy Price. They panicked with that pick because they were fixating on center. They had to get their center and Billy Price, but instead, they could have traded back, got an extra selection, and still got him. I don't want the Bengals to fixate on a position and be in a situation where they do that. I mean, we've seen in the past, in 2021 draft, the Bengals fixated on Jackson Carman. The Bengals fixated on Drew Sample back in 2019. I hope the Bengals don't really fixate on a player. There's better players on the board. And like I said, I just don't really like the idea of the Bengals drafting an offensive lineman in the 1st round. 2nd round, I'd be more open to it if there's a guy who really shouldn't be there. But I'm not really sold on drafting offensive linemen in a draft compared to some people. You sign your needs, you draft talent, you draft the best player available, and you sign talent. The Bengals did that in Orlando Brown. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the Bengals do in next month's draft. It's absolutely crazy that we are less than 1 month away. Kind of recapping this draft here one more time. So the Bengals trade back with the Philadelphia Eagles. They swap 1st-round picks, and the Bengals get the Eagles' 3rd-round pick, the 94th pick overall. The Bengals get Jamar Gibbs, the running back from Alabama, with the 28th pick, with the 2nd-round pick, 60th pick overall. They somehow get Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. With their 3rd-round picks, they get TCU corner Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson and Michigan defense tackle Mozzie Smith. You look at the 4th round, they get Dorian Williams, the linebacker from Tulane. In the 5th round, they take Bowling Green edge rusher Carl Brooks. In the 6th round, they take Tennessee edge rusher Byron Young. And in the 7th round, they take Florida linebacker Ventrell Miller. Hopefully the Bengals have a similar draft to this, because if they do, pretty much go ahead and say they would have by far the best draft of any team in the NFL. But cannot wait for the draft next month. But that about does it for this video. Comment your thoughts on this mock draft here. Comment who you want the Bengals to get in the draft. Comment who you want the Bengals not to get in the draft. But thank you all so much for watching. If you're new to the video, if you're new to the channel or seen my videos before, I would really, really appreciate it if you can like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time on the Sports 2 Hines Show.